On October the 24th, 1917, a heavy bombardment by gas and high explosive shell drenched the Italian positions on the Isonzo. The Italian trenches, dugouts and shelters were overwhelmed in a hurricane of fire. All communications to the rear were destroyed. Snow and sleet showers, the Austro-German army advanced 14 miles through the mountains. Many of the Italians were terrified when German troops appeared.
One glance at the Pickelhaube coming over the hill was enough.
By the end of the first day, the enemy had crossed the Isonzo, captured the key village of Caporetto, and taken 30,000 prisoners. The Italian Second Army was smashed and in headlong retreat.
It was impossible for us even to think of abandoning these positions that had cost hundreds or thousands of lives, to leave our dead there. We just couldn't believe it. Still we had to withdraw.
An attempt was made to stand on the Tagliamento River, 30 miles back, but the enemy crossed by a half-destroyed bridge. The Italians went back again, 400,000 men, along roads blocked by refugees.
One of the most tiresome things, from a military point of view, were the Austrian motorcyclists and sidecars with light machine guns that used to appear from nowhere and disappeared to nowhere after machine gunning a convoy or a crowd of refugees. And we felt the whole time kind of shame that we had been defeated.
Through the exhausted and beaten army, the word passed round. Andiamo a casa. We're going home. By 1917, the majority of Italian soldiers were weary of the war. An English officer wrote,
"They were desperately tired, physically and spiritually. Their food was insufficient and was continually reduced. They had to march for days to the trenches and back heavily laden. They were often at the mercy of stupid and brutal commanders who maintained discipline by means of bestial punishment. They got a few days' leave once a year, 2 postcards a week to write home. No amusements, no relaxation, no rest."
On the Piave River, a mere 15 miles from Venice, Cadorna managed to rally his troops.
"We have taken the inflexible decision to defend here the honor of Italy. The Italian nation commands us to die and not to yield."
On the Piave, after a retreat of 70 miles, the Italians held the enemy at bay. In under 3 weeks, they had lost 400,000 men, of whom 360,000 were either prisoners or deserters.
The approach of the war to within 15 miles of Venice has produced inevitable changes. The ducal palace is no more than a soulless skeleton boarded up and emptied. Such shops as are still open are selling off their goods. Those Venetians who have stayed are calm and hoping for the best. The Grand Canal with its shuttered palaces has a mournful but noble air. Most of the gondolas are gone.
Five British and 6 French divisions were sent to Italy. The arrival of the British was observed by the historian G.M. Trevelyan.
The dull anxiety that overhung that November month seemed lifted as they marched by. I believe that the Italians, civil and military, were as cheered as I was. Looking on such men, it seemed impossible that we could be beaten.
General Cadorna now gave way to the younger General Armando Diaz. Under his command, the Italian army made an astonishing recovery. The change in the heart of the country was no less remarkable. The armchair defeatists were silenced, the peacemongers put to shame. In the face of a common danger, the Italian people at last found unity. To the Austrian army, Caporetto brought much-needed relief and the welcome booty of huge stores of food. It drew together its many races, Austro-German, Magyars, Yugoslavs, Czechs, Romanians, and Poles. Morale improved. For a while, the troops could relax on full stomachs. But at home, there was no such unity. In the winter of 1917, the mutual dislikes of the different races throughout the empire was intensified by the unequal distribution of food. Vienna was starving, while Budapest had something to spare. The harvest was a failure, the administration chaotic.
The rations became smaller and smaller as the war went on, and the black market flourished. Fairly officially, the quality of the food was so terrible. Bread, for instance, gave many people some eczema. Potatoes were very short too.
And it was bitterly cold. The electricity was cut, the gas was cut. The children were really underfed because we had very little milk, and we had to be very careful to have a drop for everyone.
In May 1918, the Emperor Karl was summoned by the Kaiser. His secret peace moves of the previous year had been made public by the French. His duplicity towards his German ally stood revealed. Now the Germans demanded that the Austrians attack again in Italy in support of their own offensive in France. This time there would be no German help. Reluctantly, Karl had to agree. The key to the whole Italian line on the Piave was the Monte Grappa, 5,000 feet high and dominating the plain below. It had become a symbol of Italian resistance during the fierce fighting of the previous winter.
On the 15th of June, the whirlwind burst on the Grappa. Within 5 hours, our defences were smashed, 3 of the key positions were lost, the Austrians looked down on Bassano. But the soldiers of the Grappa, worn out, decimated, dashed forward again and again to the counterattack. In 24 hours, all was over, and we could think of the Piave as inviolate.
Elsewhere, the Austrian attacks made some headway against 2 British divisions in the Asiago Plateau. Further east still, they crossed the Piave on a 15-mile front. But the attacks had been spread over too wide a frontage. The Austrians were short of ammunition, short of transport, short of food. Worst of all, the Piave now rose in flood. Within 3 days, counterattacks had thrown them back across the river, with the loss of 150,000 men. On the sea, too, Austria had suffered a grievous blow.